Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are working on Sir Thomas More, and we get to hear from Sir Thomas More again today in Act 2, Scene 4. So London has broken out in riots. There's a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment running around London, and the common Londoners like Dal Williamson and John Lincoln and Williamson and all of these other people, the Bettses, feel like all of the foreigners need to leave because they're taking our jobs, sort of stuff. Not so much jobs as wives and money and food. So they had posted a letter saying, everybody, come on, we got to get together and oust all of these people. So there's been riots going on, and they decided to burn down the town. And most of the foreigners have actually left by the time they go to burn down their houses, which is good for the foreigners, but a little maybe frustrating for the rioters because they don't get to have their, cathartic moment. So at the beginning of Act 2, Scene 4, we had them all sort of still gathered together at St. Martin's Gate, and John Lincoln sort of being the leader, like, let's go do this, and we got to be strong, we got to blah, 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 all of this. But meanwhile, the people in government, being Shrewsbury and Surrey and More and all of those people, are like, maybe if we just talk to them. Actually, it was Sir Thomas More that was like, maybe if we just talk to them, we can talk them down. And the other guys were like, yeah, he's smart, let's listen to him. So they all came in, and all of the common Londoners were fighting about who it is that they should listen to. And finally, they decided they're going to listen to Sir Thomas More. And in yesterday's speech, he was saying, you're shouting for peace, by which you're disturbing the peace. So you can't really have it both ways. And also, if you want peace, but you're the ones who are disrupting the peace, what happens when you get the peace that you want and somebody else comes in to disrupt it? Because yours is not going to be the last rebellion. There's always going to be something else that comes after. And the Dal Williamson is like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. And Sir Thomas More goes on to say, by what you're doing, you're actually going against God because you're going against the king. And they're like, no, heaven forbid we should do that. And Sir Thomas More says, nay, certainly you are. For to the king God hath his office lent, of dread, of justice, power, and command, hath bid him rule, and willed you to obey. And to add ampler majesty to this, he hath not only lent the king his figure, his throne and sword, but given him his own name, calls him a god on earth. What do you then, rising against him that God himself installs, but rise against God? What do you to your souls in doing this? Oh, desperate as you are, wash your foul minds with tears, and those same hands that you, like rebels, lift against the peace, lift up for peace. And your unreverent knees, make them your feet to kneel to be forgiven. Tell me but this. What rebel captain, as mutinies are incident, by his name can still the rout? Who will obey a traitor? Or how can well that proclamation sound when there is no addition but a rebel to qualify a rebel? You'll put down strangers, kill them, cut their throats, possess their houses, and lead the majority of law in line to slip him like a hound. Say now the king, as he is clement, if the offender mourn, should so much come to short of your great trespass, as but to banish you, whither would you go? What country, by the nature of your error, should give you harbor? Go you to France or Flanders, to any German province, to Spain or Portugal, nay, anywhere that not adheres to England? Why, you must needs be strangers. Would you be pleased to find a nation of such barbarous temper that breaking out in hideous violence would not afford you an abode on earth? Whet their detested knives against your throats, spurn you like dogs, and, like as if that God owed not nor made not you, nor that the claimants were not all appropriate to your comforts, but chartered unto them, what would you think to be thus used. This is the stranger's case, and this your mountainous inhumanity. So he's making some good points here as he's trying to put them all in their places. He starts out, because this was still during a period of time when they felt like the king was chosen by God. So he starts out by saying, God installed this king. So if you're rising up against the king, ergo you're rising up against God. So how are you gonna navigate that? And what are you gonna say to St. Peter when you get to the pearly gates if you rebelled against God in this? And also, mutinies can happen. What happens when you need help? You, as you now stand, rising up against the king, are traitors. So if other people come to oust you, who's going to help you? Because you're traitors. You're not going to be able to get any help anywhere. And also, not to mention the fact that you're treating these strangers to our country so horribly. If you ever had to flee the country, let's say the king is nice and just banishes you and doesn't kill you for what it is that you're doing right now, where are you going to go? You're being horrible to people from France and Italy and all these other places. They're going to realize that when you get there. And if you have to go to one of those countries and start a new home, and you're greeted the way that you're greeting these foreigners who've come to our home, would you like that? So he's doing sort of what he did with the whole pickpocketing thing, where they were like, yeah, but it's the person's fault for carrying around that much money. And then he turns it around, well, it was your fault for carrying around so much money, and that's how I was able to steal your purse. What he's saying now here is, you're treating these foreigners horribly. If you ever have to be a foreigner, here's hoping that you are also not treated as horribly. And can you see now how inhumane you're being to these people who have just come to our country to live, and we don't, for any one of a million reasons. So it's a lot of good points and some really poignant stuff in there, and it does get through to the crowd, and they're all sort of like, oh, yeah, I guess I hadn't thought of it that way. You're right. And Sir Thomas More goes on to say, the best thing that you can do now is turn yourselves in, because if you surrender now and ask for mercy from the king, he will most likely grant you mercy. And they're like, okay, yeah, we'll do that. So he tells Surrey to take some of them to a bunch of prisons, because they have to be arrested for what they did. It's going to be up to the king what happens to them. But he's like, you take some of them to here, and you, Shrewsbury, go down to this place where a whole bunch of other people are gathering, ready to also riot and mutiny and quell that whole thing. And they're like, okay, cool, this all sounds good. And Dal Williamson and a couple of the other London commoners actually sort of thank Sir Thomas More as they're heading out, and they're like, yeah, you said some really good things, and here's hoping that the king is nice to us. And then they're all taken off. So now the scene's not quite over yet. We're at a point where it's just the higher ups, the sort of like the governmental body, the Lord, I think the Lord Mayor is left, and Sir Thomas More and a couple others, and they need to have a little bit of a wrap-up conversation to what just happened as Sir Thomas More quelled this riot before the scene is over. But we get one more monologue out of Sir Thomas More from this scene before we get to move on, so we'll hear that tomorrow. I'll see you then.